Well, good afternoon, boys and goyim. This is Vincent Burt of the 11th Hour Remnant Messenger and the Church of Jesus Christ Christian coming to you once again. Today's message, I'm going to talk about the Corporation of the United States. Now, you hear me talk a lot about communism and how we've been overrun by communism, and indeed 2/3 of our government are, if not card-carrying communists, they certainly are sycophants and agitated by the communists to do their bidding. And what is communism? Well, communism is founded in Jewry, and we know that the Jews started communism through Marx, Engels, Trotsky, Lenin, and many others. How is the United States, being a corporation, compatible with communism? Well, it's very simple. We hear a lot about the corporations in the United States running the United States government, when indeed the opposite is true. And I'm going to explain how that all happened today. Now, there are many of you out there, although I don't get many hits, most that do follow me at all, have a clear understanding what's going on in the world. And sometimes I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm hoping that as that ship in the ocean that goes by, and an hour later the waves from that ship begin to hit the shore, I'm thinking that the message will go out and move across the nation, person by person, bit by bit. But those of you who follow me pretty much know what I know, and I would only hope that you pass along what you know to people who you know, and so on and so on. And it would be possible then for enough people to be aroused and angered and awakened that they can do something about this once great republic we had, which has been given over to the communists, the Jews, and bowing to the Muslims these days, thanks to our half-nigger president, who we don't know who he is, where he came from, but we do know what his agenda is. Anyway, I'm going to talk to you about the United States Corporation and the restoration of the Republic. But as I have mentioned in the past, and I'll keep mentioning it over and over again, we cannot elect ourselves out of this mess we're in as a nation. It is time to take action. Okay, you probably already know something has been very seriously wrong in this country for quite some time. But did you know your country has been lost to you entirely? Did you know that you had even lost it? Oh, you have an inkling of it, I'm sure. Did you know that everything you were taught in school in regard to your country, your history, your government, and even the basic facts about your rights were lies and misdirection? And that those lies were actually deliberate? Probably not, but don't feel bad. Few do. I'm going to attempt here to give you some basics that have been kept from you so that you can first recognize what has been done to you and why it has been done, and then understand what has been done for you to hope to correct it, paving the way so that you may be able to reclaim your life, your liberty, and your pursuit of happiness. In short, to repossess that which our founding fathers guaranteed to you when they penned our founding documents, your God-given unalienable rights. Before I begin with that, with what went wrong, before I fill you in on how dangerously close you are to living out your life under a communist socialist regime, but how close you are and how close you are to selling all your children and all their children into abject poverty and hopeless slavery, I will give you some meaningful advice. Whether or not you take that advice is entirely up to you. I doubt that you will. Okay, this should make the bad news easier to digest. At least you can learn learn the worst from a place of relief instead of hopeless defeat, from hope of not of anger. The good news is the Republic, yes, that's right, we're not a democracy and never have been a democracy, of the United States of America has been lost. That's the good news. Yes, we know you didn't know it, and you didn't know it had been destroyed, and we'll get into that fact and the way it has been destroyed, and the reason you can take a huge breath and take a sigh of relief, because there is hope on the horizon. Your prosperity, your rights, your future may be restored along with it. The yoke of slavery brought down upon you by an overblown federal government stripping you of your liberties and your wealth has been unlocked. It is now up to you to choose between life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or a life of poverty and servitude. The last time the people of this nation were given that choice was in 1775. I will show you and tell you how you can stand tall, proud, and free once again when you reach the end of the bad news portion of this little missive. The bad news is the last lawfully elected president of the Republic of the United States of America was Abraham Lincoln. At the outbreak of the Civil War, President Lincoln declared a national emergency and placed the country under martial law and suspended the Constitution for the duration of the war. After the war, the country lay devastated and still hopelessly divided as the South struggled to rebuild, and bitter roots of resentment took hold as the era of Reconstruction began. The South was eventually resurrected. The Constitution was never. In 1868, with the country still under a declared national emergency, the 41st Congress allowed the federal government to incorporate, get this, allowed the federal government to incorporate and to inhabit a corporate location to be known as the District of Columbia. There's not 1 in 10,000 in America that know this. In 1871, Congress unlawfully, without informing the public, much less procuring the consent of the people, made it official by unconstitutionally passing the Act of 1871, formally declaring the Corporation of the United States to be the lawful government of this country with no jurisdiction outside of the District of Columbia except by our consent. Not asked for, but gotten by insidious means, which we are now only discovering. And having jurisdiction over the various territories, that is the Virgin Islands, the Maldives, the Puerto Rico, and etc. The corporate federal government then discarded our original Constitution and began to draft their own, so similar as to escape notice. You cannot use the Constitution any longer to defend yourself because you are no longer a party to it. This is Paddleford, Fay and Company versus the mayor and aldermen of the city of Savannah, 14 Georgia, 438, 520, period. The original 13th Amendment was removed in order to avoid violation of their version of the Constitution from the start. The truth has been thrust before our eyes and assaulted our ears ever since. How many times have you seen in print or heard a politician refer to the Constitution as the Constitution of the United States? Their friends and neighbors is the original lie for all to see and hear, for our true original de jure Constitution was written as the Constitution for the United States of America, not of. Words mean everything, and the changing of one seemingly unimportant word can and did make a difference between a free republic and a corporate takeover. With a takeover complete and the people still blissfully in the dark, the transformation of America began in earnest. In order to accomplish that transformation without another war, the secret had to be kept, and the society of America drastically changed and dumbed down in the extreme. The reason for that takeover was simple: greed. For money, certainly, but mostly for the acquisition of that which those who have everything cannot have: power. Complete and total power. So much power as to give those who hold it control over the entire world. The force behind this transformation was a group of powerful foreign bankers, and I'm going to give you 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count. They are the International Jewish Cabal. They attempted many times to take over America in the past by capturing her monetary system and failed. But with the Act of 1871, the door to obscene power and wealth was thrown wide open. America was then on a sure and certain path to destruction at the hands of a few self-appointed elitists. The plan was brilliant and carefully crafted by men who had an infinite amount of patience. They knew it would take decades to accomplish, but the game was on. And you know that the Jews are seeds of Satan, and in their DNA and genome, unlike us, they have this drive within them to destroy Western civilization, capitalism, and particularly white Christians. By 1913, under Woodrow Wilson, they were able to corrupt Congress to get the 16th and the 17th Amendment passed. Even though the 16th Amendment was never ratified, what the people didn't know was just fine with them. And I'm going to read that 16th Amendment to you. And I know people have tried to go into court of law and for not paying their taxes and being arrested and apprehended and imprisoned by the Internal Revenue Service, a total fraudulent organization. And they tried to use the fact that the 16th Amendment was never ratified, and every court in the country will throw that argument out. Here's the 16th Amendment as written in the amendments to the Constitution. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. That was totally fraudulent. Anyway, the 16th Amendment paved the way for the bankers to gain complete control over the nation's monetary system with the creation of the Federal Reserve debt system. There's nothing federal about it. It's owned lock, stock, and barrel by a foreign corporation, all Jews, designed at a weekend retreat in Georgia called Jekyll Island, and I've talked about that in another presentation. Following that, the Internal Revenue Service, also owned by them, was created. Now, you didn't know that, did you? To further control the monetary system and place the people under permanent debt, the bankers manipulated the economy and plunged the nation into a Great Depression. And they did it. It was contrived. It was planned. And we suffered for it. Then their hand-picked chief executive office, remember, the government is now a corporation, not a government. Therefore, there are no restrictions of birthright to hold that office. Franklin Delano Roosevelt called in all the nation's gold, leaving the population with absolutely worthless paper notes backed by nothing, created out of thin air and based on debt. The second step was creating a way to profit even more on the greatest resource the nation possessed, her people. We, the people. Have you ever stopped to wonder where the term human resources came from? How can humans be a national resource? The term itself implies ownership, and that is exactly what it means. We are human capital, and that's by Executive Order number 13037. You can look that up. With the enactment of the two items, we were converted from a free people to a corporate chattel, no different than in the days of the knights and nobles of Europe, where we just were serfs on the land. The certificate of live birth and later the Social Security system, both of those documents created an all-capital name entity which is bonded and traded on the open market, and I touched on that in a prior presentation. A trust account is created in that name, and from that moment on, everything you do in commerce, for the rest of your life is based on forcing you to borrow on your own money while creating debt from it, while the elite amass wealth by stealing your sweat equity. You own no property, whether you believe it or not. Slaves can't own property. Read the deed to your property that you think is yours. You are listed as a tenant. Senate Document 43, the 73rd Congress in the first session. Every time you sign your name on a check, a credit application, a license of any kind, a contract, or a check, that little box, are you a U.S. citizen, you are granting your permission to be under the unconstitutional jurisdiction of the Corporation of the United States of America. Take out a magnifying glass and examine the line on your checks where you sign your name. Look at your Social Security card and your driver's license, your credit and debit cards, and you will see your name all in capital letters indicating that you are a corporate entity. The entity is known as your straw man, and every time you walk into a courtroom and you are charged or indicted, your charges will be on a document with your numbers in capital, with your name in capital letters, and that means you are entering their jurisdiction. Okay, so Worse, by signing a birth certificate for your child, you have given legal custody of that child to the state, which is why the state can take that child from you if they decide you should not have him or her, either by vaccinations, or someone said you spanked them too hard, or you're not sending him to school, or you're trying to homeschool him and they don't want you to do that. We have not had a treasury since 1921. In 1944, by the Bretton Woods Agreement, our nation's capital, indeed all of the District of Columbia, was ceded to the International Monetary Fund, who owns the Federal Reserve, the Internal Revenue Service, and various alphabet agencies, which are also corporate entities: Federal Communications System, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, National Administration of Space Administration. The International Monetary Fund is an agency of the United Nations. Are we having a lot of fun, boys and goyim? Black's Law Dictionary, the 6th edition, page 816. New York City is defined in the federal regulations as the United Nations. After all, the United Nations is sitting on 13 acres ceded to it by David Rockefeller. It's a sovereign nation within the city of New York, and as obviously the city now falls under the United Nations jurisdiction. Rudolph Giuliani stated on C-SPAN that New York City was the capital of the world, and he was correct. 20 CFR Chapter 111, Subpart B22.103, parentheses B, parentheses 2, parentheses 2. Also check out Revision 14 in reference to what happened on 9/11. So now, the elite own the country, the money, and they own us. Again, brilliant, but not by any means a plan completed. Even up to this point, if the people had been made aware of the plan behind the scenes, they would have revolted. Americans, are particularly covetous of our perceived freedoms, regardless of the fact that their rights were slowly but surely disappearing. And if you can't tell that, then you must be 4 years old. So what was left for the elite to do in order to accomplish total control? Well, they had to change the way the Americans behave and how we learn and what we believe and how we will react. That meant control over education. Enter the Federal Department of Education. Have you read your children's history books? Better yet, have you read those that your parents and grandparents were taught from, and then read your own children's history books? I've done it. They're very, very different. Naturally, American politics and ideology had to be manipulated as well. This is where the emerging progressives, socialists, communists, Fabianistic, Gramsci's, excelled. The ideology of progressives is based on Marxism. I'm shocked. And the fantasy utopian socialist society. Never mind that it has never worked in the history of the world, even though it has been tried hundreds of times and continues to be the source of suffering, genocide, and serfdom in many places of the world today. The elite don't believe in this ideology, but they do recognize it as a means to an end. Under progressive influence, both society and political thinking were gradually and drastically changed. The concept of political correctness, PC, which we are buried with every day, was born and slowly replaced common sense. People are just now realizing that PC has usurped and replaced the one of 10 of the Bill of Rights, the freedom of speech. Gradually, the elite brought up every mainstream media outlet on the airwaves and those in the form of the written word. Today, they literally control very nearly all news, television and radio, big screen at the theaters across the nation, and everything else. The average American is blissfully unaware that they are being presented only with what the corporation of the United States wants them to know, and are deliberately kept from any information which might lead them to question. Basic American values of morality, personal responsibility, and virtue were chipped away and eroded. Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. And guess who said that? One of our founders, Benjamin Franklin, probably as brilliant as Jefferson and Madison. The elite are more than happy to be that master. While the educational system is used to indoctrinate, we don't educate anymore, remember that. The media is used to brainwash. All the while, Americans still believe they are free. Education and media, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? 2 out of 3 ain't bad. in just a few decades. The biggest obstacle to the elite's plan was and continues to be America's faith. Today we live in a politically correct society where the virtuous, the moral, and the faithful are vilified, especially those of the Christian faith. Even the word God is struck from our classrooms, crosses banned in public, and national religious holidays reduced to generic secular celebrations unless you're a black man. Our judicial branch of government has twisted the Constitution so far that decisions are handed down based on a concept which is not anywhere mentioned in any single founding document. Separation of church and state, and I've talked about this before. Nowhere is that mentioned in our Constitution, Bill of Rights, or Declaration of Independence. In reality, it was a term used in a letter written by Thomas Jefferson, which was taken out of context for the sake of expediency. By destroying America's faith, the foundation of her society is also destroyed. The family. You don't need God anymore. You have us Democrats. Nancy Pelosi, that goddamn Jewess and minority leader, used to be the majority leader, said that in 2006. You don't need God anymore. You have us Democrats, meaning goddamn communists. If you doubt for a moment that you're under an unlawful, unconstitutional de facto government, just walk into any courtroom in the land, and I talked about that before. And look at the flag. Why does it have a gold braid and fringe around it? That gold fringe represents the rule of law which holds jurisdiction in that court, and it's not the common law of the land. It's military, maritime law. Those of us who believe that the yellow fringe flag is the law of admiralty flag will know all about this. For the rest of us, will be a shocking new disclosure. President Dwight David Eisenhower, another Jew, signed Executive Order number 10834 on August 21st, 1959, and had printed in the Federal Register at 24 FR 6865, pursuant to the law, stated that a military flag is a flag that resembles the regular flag of the United States, except that it has a yellow fringed border on three sides. This signifies that when you enter the court, you have entered and placed yourself under a foreign jurisdiction. You are a straw man. Okay, our true constitution and republic form of government is the law of the land, common law, and that law has been shoved aside, hidden and left to mold with time while a corporation marches us down the road to one world dictatorship and poverty. Everything above is easily verified, but the bare tip of the iceberg in corruption and deception this nation has been enveloped in for more than 134 years. We are now told that the Constitution is outdated, irrelevant, and a list of negative rules. The founders wrote this document that way in an attempt to ensure that no branch of government could overrun the people. Well, the legislative branch was designed with two houses for a reason. The Senate was structured to be the federal arm of the representation for the state legislatures. That's why our Constitution dictates senators be appointed by those bodies, but the 17th Amendment erased that and placed the Senate under the same corrupted election system the Congress is subject to. Our states now have virtually no representation, and I think we all know that by now, on the federal level, so neither do we the people. This is why your government doesn't listen to you, and they haven't for a long time. This is why they only appear to when campaigning for election and promptly do as they please once they reach the hill. They do not work for you, and they never will. They work for a foreign-owned banking cabal better known as the International Monetary Fund, all fucking Jews. So today we have a hopelessly bloated federal government which literally controls every single aspect of your life, from the pillows you sleep on to the food on your table. There is not one thing you do from the time you rise in the morning to the time you lay your head down at night that is not regulated in one way or another from a local, state, or federal government. We have forgotten our founders and who we are. We are thoroughly apathetic and indoctrinated, and we have allowed ourselves to be enslaved and dependent upon a corrupt corporation. It's time to reverse that, what's been done to the greatest nation on the earth. There have been untold numbers of crimes against humanity to be paid and accounted for by these treasonous traitors. We must restore our honor in our country and then look to the future for our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. The rightful government our founders have been re-inhabited quietly, peacefully behind the scenes. That's what we need to get. This is America, and no person can be forced to choose freedom and the republic over slavery. If you choose to remain a slave, though, to the nanny state, you're free to do so. If, on the other hand, you are outraged at what has been done to you and ready to return the land to the land of our forefathers, then it is time for you to be a Paul Revere and let your neighbors, friends, family, and others know what you know. Take to the streets, or better yet, as a lone wolf, and attack those in the still of the night who wish to enslave you. How you do it and who you do it to is up to you. I would only hope that you choose to do something to strike as close to the head as possible. Cutting off a toe will not even make the monster flinch or blink. This is Vincent Byrd of the 11th Hour Messenger coming to you with more truth, if you can handle it. So far, it doesn't look like many are handling it out there, sitting scratching their fat bellies from eating their fat food and drinking all that damn beer and watching your sports and entertaining yourself to death instead of getting off your ass and thinking about the future and your children. But it's easier to be complacent. You'll be dead by the time this thing all collapses anyway, won't you? Anyway, you got more truth today. I would only hope that you pass it along. Maybe somebody out there has the courage to do something.